Hello, everyone. Welcome to this panel on AI in India. I am Partha Talukdar. I'm a research scientist at Google Research Bangalore. And we have a really exciting panel on a very important topic for us today. And we have a very distinguished three panelists who are going to guide us through a lot of these issues and their experiences in this important area. So first we have Professor Ravi from IIT Madras, and he's also a visiting researcher at Google India.
Hi, Partha.
Hi, Ravi. So Ravi leads so he's a faculty member in the computer science department at IIT Madras, and he leads also the Robert Boss Center for Data Science and AI at IIT Madras. He got his PhD from University of Massachusetts, Amherst, and his master's degree from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. And Ravi's interests span the areas of reinforcement learning, complex networks, geometric deep learning. And as I mentioned, he is also spending time at Google Research as a visiting researcher. So welcome, Ravi. Next, we have Dr. Geeta Manjunath. Geeta is the CEO of Miramai. Hi, Geeta. Welcome. Most of you will already know that Miramai has developed a breakthrough AI solution for detecting early stage breast cancer in a non-invasive, radiation-free manner. And Geeta holds a PhD from IISc and also has a management education from Kellogg's in Chicago. Geeta, it's great to have you here, and we look forward to learning from you in the panel.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And then moving on, we have Dr. Pankaj Gupta. So Pankaj is a director of engineering at Google India, where he leads the Google Pay, which I assume many of you are already users and beneficiaries. And he leads Google Pay consumer in India and worldwide. Pankaj was also an early employee at Twitter and was responsible for a lot of the search and infrastructure work at Twitter. And interestingly, he has also had multiple startup experiences. He brings a very diverse set of experiences to the panel. And Pankaj holds a PhD from Stanford, and his undergrad was from IIT Delhi. So welcome, Pankaj. Great to have you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Sure, our pleasure. And we were also hoping to have Ms. Anna Roy from Niti Aayog, as you may have seen in the announcements. But unfortunately, due to some pressing work items, she couldn't join us today. So I mean, like maybe we can just jump in to the questions. So I encourage everyone to post their questions on the Dory. This is a great opportunity to learn from our distinguished panelists. So let's not let this opportunity slip. So hopefully all of you already have the Dory link. So let me start with Geeta. So Geeta, your work in breast cancer with AI has been really impressive. So we're just curious, what were the specific ways in which your approach evolved towards the Indian context, rather than adopting something taking off the shelf from what has been developed in the West and then applying in the Indian context?
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's great to be on this panel of eminent actual scientists in AI, which I've always been a fan of. Thanks, Partha, for that question. As you mentioned, we are using AI for detecting early stage breast cancer. And if you look at it in terms of sort of what has been the traditional way of detecting abnormalities such as cancer, and not just in breast, in many other areas, it's always been use of X-rays, right? To see if there is any hard stuff, right? Which looks a little abnormal, and then sort of you send only suspicious people for biopsy and pathological test, which basically confirms whether it's cancer or just a benign condition. And in the same way for breast cancer, the X-ray based analysis is called mammography. And there has been considerable work, including in Google, to use mammography images that are collected over the last, tens of years, sorry, and millions of data on which AI models have been developed to say whether something, there exists a lesion which requires attention, and if that lesion is likely to be malignant. And there's also considerable number of data sets available, like DDSM data set, if some of you want to sort of play with it, and so on and so forth, right? And 3-4 such data sets which you could download and build models to check this out. Now, this has been around, and there are also now FDA approved AI models for analyzing mammo images. So these all have come forward in the last 3-4 years, and very recently, last 2 years onwards, you're seeing US FDA as well approving this. Now, how are we different from this? When we look at mammography as a methodology of using X-rays to detect breast cancer, what happens is, one is it becomes extremely expensive for a country like India, or many countries in Asia as well, where a mammography machine which costs, if I can tell in rupees, right, a 3D mammogram costs about 2.5 crores. And how many hospitals will be able to afford such a expensive machine? For screening, right? For diagnosis, it's very important. Of course, you can go for 2D mammogram, which will be about 1 crore rupee, which is $200,000 roughly. So that becomes a major limitation to start with, which enabling the test for people if they want to do early screening, right? So that is one big limitation that exists. And secondly, mammography does not work on women under 45 years of age, because what's called as dense breast. The whole breast appears dense and you're trying to find small lesions. It is not, physics limitation of density variation, not throwing up easily there. So because of these two main reasons, mammography is not applicable to many people in Asia, where you see more and more younger women facing this issue, and particularly in Asia, like Japan, Singapore, even women above 45 have what's called as dense breast. Japan has 80% density. So there's a huge limitation of on population, like population in general. So this is more from a market standpoint, right? Where there is a gap that exists. And because X-ray is radiation, you cannot do that test very often. So what we started doing is to look at if there are other sensing modalities which do not have the density limitation, and can we make a difference with AI? And fortunately, we found more information about thermography, which is thermal imaging, measuring temperature variations on the chest, which has previously been tried for breast cancer detection, but it was only approved as an adjunct modality, that is an additional modality, because of the accuracy issues that existed when people were trying to manually interpret these or visually interpret these images. And so that is where we thought a database decision-making system purely powered by ML would be helpful. And we started working on this almost 5-6 years ago, 5 years ago at least. And so now we have developed this method where we use both semantic kind of features based on literature, what kind of features matter, what can be explained to the doctor before saying, yes, she is malignant, but she's malignant because of her vascularity in this particular area is better. So we actually generate an image automatically with annotations and qualifications of these annotated lesions, saying why we think she is malignant, and so on and so forth. So all of this has been done. So end result is that we do have a very, very affordable test in rural areas. We are able to do it at $2, compared to subsidized rates of $250, which is in the US, right? So that really helps save many women. We have screened about 35,000 women. We also provide this in hospitals. We've gone through regulatory clearances in India, as well as very recently we've cleared the European and some of the Asian regulatory clearances as well. So as a technologist, I feel like AI is maturing, if I can use that word, to make it usable in mission critical, health critical diseases like this. And happy to go into certain aspects of this which may be interesting to the audience as we move along today.
Yeah, thanks, Geeta. That's really inspiring and really impressive. So yeah, so also congratulations on the CE approval. I guess like that came recently. So that was also my follow-up
Thank you.
question of like what are your plans of like going beyond India and addressing communities in other underserved countries like in Africa, Latin America, or like Southeast Asia. So if you could throw some light on that, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. This problem is not limited to India. It is a global issue. So, of course, when we actually want to expand to any country, especially when we talk about medical devices, software-based medical devices, AI-based software-based medical devices, each of these become a little bit more harder to clear the regulatory, requirements. So we are in that process, and thankfully, because of the CE approval, many of the Asian countries also become Asian and African countries become. So we've started working with some partners to do some initial, clinical testing once again in individual countries, and then take it beyond India.
Great. Thanks, Geeta. Uh, so now moving to you, Ravi. So can you walk us through,
Uh, Partha, I have a follow-up question for Geeta. Can I get it in
please, yeah,
before
go
you
ahead.
share?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So, no, Geeta, I had this question. So once you start moving out of India, right? So have you noticed like physiological differences between women in India versus Africa, or even within Africa? There are so many types, right? Well, sub-Saharan people would have a different kind of body type than people in the south of the continent. So in such case, have you noticed a need to keep fine tuning your model, and how do you decide on that?
Yeah. So, good question. The one line answer is we haven't, tried it beyond India so far. All of our 5,000 have been in India. Having said that, many of the hospitals like Narayana Hrudayalaya, HCG have many of these sort of medical tourism kind of people from Africa and Middle East, as well as other neighboring countries of India who fly in to actually do the tests in India. So those are the people we've screened, and because this doesn't depend on the color or any skin color or any of that. It's actually depends on the tissue activity, which is thankfully the same across all human beings. So far we have not seen a major difference because of the country kind of variation. Having said that, yes, literature says that Asian women have higher risk for cancer. So there may be some variations which we have to account for. Definitely, there is a need for retuning and when we screen more. The reason why we are going with the quick clinical validation into every country, maybe not as elaborate as thousands of people, at least a few hundreds of people, to make sure that if there is any fine tuning needed, we do it. But just from a regulatory standpoint, and also because we have many AI enthusiasts, and it's a very good question, Ravi, that you asked, is that and as a technologist, we want to keep on learning and sort of releasing new models as and when you have a better result. But then what happens is, from a regulatory standpoint, every new model that is released, it has to go through a grilling cycle of validation and regression testing before you actually get onto the production. Sometimes you may have to go back to the regulatory body to say, I'm going to release this new model, new trained model. So can I do it under the same umbrella? This is called the locked model concept, right? Only locked model permission is what we have got so far. So we are crossing fingers to see that our first 100 people that we screen will have not too many variations. If it is, we just have to go through one more round of regulatory clearance. Unfortunately, that is a state of clearance of healthcare.
So we are used to seeing software version 2.0, but I don't ever remember seeing a drug version 2.0. So
yeah, so people have to start seeing this.
we start thinking about that. It's very, 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 very interesting. Sure. Okay, Partha, I'm open to your question now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thanks. So I was just curious, what are some of the ways, first of all, your view on AI in the Indian context, like as an applied field in India, and also how some of your own work have evolved to address challenges in India through AI.
Sure. So thank you for inviting me to the panel. And I think so. Geeta actually touched on some of the issues that are very challenging when I want to talk about deploying AI solutions in India. We are not in most verticals. We are not ready for deploying AI solutions, right? So in fact, we had conversations with people in MSMEs trying to see what we can do, because we thought that that is one area that is rich for intervention by AI. And then we started talking to them, and then we found that in the majority of the cases, they don't even have a complete digitalization of their factory workflow, right? So in such a case, where is the question of trying to do AI there, right? So there's a lot of challenge in India in terms of the availability of technology at the ground level for us to start thinking of putting AI on top of it. So we have to be very careful in choosing, at what level, in what domains, in what areas we are going to intervene, and even in things like, suppose I built this fantastic AI tool that can look at MRI scans and then come up with solutions and so on and so forth. I typically end up adding so much to the cost that I see many startups, they're saying that it's financially not viable for them to market to an Indian audience, and many of them are migrating to the US and other destinations where it makes it feasible for them to take a AI-based solution to the market, right? So so that is why I'm really amazed with what Nirmaya has done, because they not only gave an AI-based solution, but they also worked on the the implementation end of it, right? So that they actually have affordable hardware as well, and that kind of an end-to-end solution is what is absolutely needed in the Indian context, right? So working at a very high level, looking at only the AI algorithms, saying that I'm working on an Indian data set, it's just not going to cut it, right? And we really have to worry about what is the delivery point, right, for India. And so that is one thing which people looking at India solutions should keep in mind as they are moving ahead, right? And personally, my work was partly theoretical, so I never worried initially about social context, right? But in the past couple of years, I have been looking at more and more the relevance of what we are doing to the context in which we are embedded in, typically the Indian context. And then there are so many questions, right, when we talk about deploying AI solutions in India, right? That have not been looked at, have not been even addressed. So, for example, even things like how fair is a solution, right? How is there some kind of notion of fairness to which the AI solution is sticking to? I mean, in other instances, I've always said that people like superhuman solutions from AI because humans are fundamentally unfair. We bring our own biases to the table, but we want an AI that is trained by us to be completely unbiased. And I thought that was not a fair ask. But I have come around to looking at this in a different light now, because the AI is considered a machine, right? And the machine is supposed to be unfair. Supposed to be unbiased, right? They're not supposed to bring in any emotions to the table. So once I get a machine that is biased, right, that's making unfair decisions in some sense, favoring one group over another, right, you are institutionalizing unfairness in some sense, right? You're making it reproducible. You're making it function at a much larger scale than a single human's bias would have, right? So in that way, because of the power of or the power to disrupt is so much, right? And I think it's fair to hold AI to a higher standards than human decision makers. And therefore, we have to start looking at these questions of, okay, what does it mean for an AI to be fair in an Indian social context? Because In fact, my experience has been this: the definition of what is social justice, what is equitable, differs from region to region, even in India, right? And we have to figure out how would you build AI systems that can encapsulate that. So that is something that I've started talking to some of the social scientists and at IIT Madras, and we have been working on that direction as well. So this is looking at such fundamental ideas that are driven from the society up, and how do we incorporate that into AI. And another direction that we have been looking at, where AI and India fundamentally meet, is looking at problems that come because of digital exclusion of population, because more and more of things are going to a digital platform, and we are finding that a larger fraction of the population get excluded. This digital divide has been a subject of study for a long time. And people also say that AI could potentially make this digital divide worse. But we want to flip it around and say that, hey, maybe AI can actually make the digital divide less.
So it looks like we lost Ravi on the connection. So maybe once the connection improves, we can get back to him. So moving on, maybe Pankaj. So how do you see the role of AI in improved financial inclusion, especially with all of the things that Google Pay and UPI has enabled? So what kind of opportunities do you see in that space?
Yeah, I see huge opportunities for AI and ML in the whole fintech sector, primarily because there's a lot of data that's flowing through, and there's a lot of high fidelity data that is there with the banks, with the networks, with the payment operators. In terms of financial inclusion, just backing up a little bit, India as a country, after the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana in 2014, there's a lot of bank accounts that opened up. By various estimates, right now there's maybe 700 to 800 million bank accounts, could be even more in the country, which is staggering. But it's also the case that maybe 40-50% of them are not used. They are basically dormant. And so while we gave bank accounts to kind of pretty much everyone, India's population is even larger, and it still has about 200 million unbanked people. And it's at the number 2. China is number 1 in terms of number of unbanked people. But fundamentally, people don't use those bank accounts because they are not in the formal financial system. And what does it mean to be in the formal financial system? Well, they're still dealing with whatever cash comes to them, and they don't understand the value of, or the meaning of, what is a savings account, what is insurance, what is credit. So it boils down to financial inclusion. Digital financial inclusion in particular kind of boils down to how do you bring these folks into the formal financial system? How do we help them build a history so that they can get easy access to credit? And that's where ML comes in a great deal. In order to have access to credit, you need access to money, and you need to have a lender give you money. And when there are lenders who want to lend money, then they need to be sure that the repayment will be done. So either the borrower can put up collateral, or in a country like India, many people do not have collateral. So, well, if you don't have collateral, then you need some kind of an information collateral. And that's where the world is moving to, with more and more payments happening digitally. Now you can just look at the payments history of, let's say, a corner shop, and a lender can evaluate whether this SME or MSME has the right ability and willingness to be able to repay a loan. So all this is possible only through kind of good ML models, and just the revolution that is happening in digital payments is fueling a great deal. Now we are still in the early stages. of this, but I'm very, very hopeful and very optimistic that the promise of fintech towards financial inclusion can actually be enabled a great deal through ML.
That's great. Thanks, Pankaj. So Ravi is back now. So as soon as we started talking about digital divide, he got disconnected. So we'll get back to you, Ravi.
So some people are more privileged and have better network connections. That was digital divide in action for you. Anyway, no, I was actually saying that we are now looking at again looking at working with social scientists on how what is it that AI can potentially bring to the table to help more people use online services effectively, right? And one of the studies that we have initiated is looking at perception of AI as well, right? So what do people think about? What are the changes that AI is going to bring to their field? How are they apprehensive? Are they supportive? Or they don't care? In fact, I had a line of thought about understanding the value of privacy that people in India have on information. Right. So we are so India is a society where if you ever been on a train and then you can start chatting with your co-passengers and soon you'll find out about where their kids went to school. I mean, when their daughters got married, whether they are pregnant or they've been. I mean, my mother-in-law goes on a train and comes back with a list of prayers that she has to offer in the temple for people, right? So the whole notion of the value of privacy that we have is very different, and so is that something that we should understand better when we start talking about gathering in data, or we should be educate people so that they are more wary about how they share data, given all this more um, digitized knowledge economy, right? And so there are so many issues that we don't have even a clue about, right? How that works in the Indian context. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in before we really say that AI is going to revolutionize India. We have to be careful about some of this from the beginning, otherwise we will put ourselves in a deep hole we can't get out of.
Great. Yeah, so very important points. Thanks, Ravi. And I think we'll hope to get more opportunities to discuss about that. But we also have quite a few questions from the audience, from the participants. So maybe we can just jump into those. And I'll keep the questions open. Whichever of you want to respond, please feel free. Yeah, so the first question is from Pallavi. She asks, what might be some good sources to look at updates and problems currently being tackled in the field of AI, specifically in India from various industries? So, I mean, I have some thoughts. I mean, one is the symposia like this that you are participating. I think hopefully should provide some of those exposures on what's happening. There are always conference publications, where a lot of the industrial work gets published, and then there are these COTSCOMAT conferences where at least locally in India, there is heavy participation from industry, so that should be one way. But apart from those, I mean, if there are other ones, Ravi, you have some thoughts?
Yeah, so there is this portal that there's a
Okay.
We lost him.
So portal and digital divide are two negative words that Ravi not use.
So I just want to add that definitely there are many startups who are trying to solve very important problems in AI, using AI, sorry. And also there are certain investors who are just sort of focusing on AI-based startups. And there are also many media sort of writers who focus on AI-based startups. So I think just sort of looking at a startup watch would be helpful. Particularly for healthcare, if you're looking at global scenario, not just in India or in Asia or whatever, FDA also maintains a list of AI startups that they're reviewing or just given approval for different types of usages. On the FDA, US FDA website, also you will see list of AI startups that have been approved for various diseases and so on.
Mhm.
Yeah, and some of them are very, very interesting. Many of the startups obviously are looking at innovative solutions for different elements, like using audio to figure out if somebody has TB or pneumonia, COVID. I mean, these are like very, very interesting approaches. I'm not saying everything is fully successful, but it's good to watch out. And I find it very fascinating to see some of the startups doing nice work.
Right. Great point. Deepak. Ravi?
Yeah. So we had our once in a year power outage at IIT Madras campus today. So sorry about that. That's why it suddenly became very dark. Uh, so I was saying that there is AI for Bharat, which is a portal that's put together by volunteers. It's initiated by a couple of my colleagues in IIT Madras, but then more people from the industry and even the startup space have contributed to that. So if you would like to look up problems, that's a good place.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe I can add that get on Twitter. That's where all the leading edge stuff is being shared first, both in the field as well as startups, as well as all over industry and academia. That's one. The second I would say is various fields. Geeta talked about healthcare. I talked about fintech. There are various fields. There's industrial, IoT. There's other fields. So it's a very wide, kind of a broad thing. It's easy to maybe also get lost, and each of these areas has a very wide and diverse kind of set of applications of AI. So I find Twitter as the best source for me to keep up with everything.
And I think there's also an India AI website. You know that Jibu is one of the person who writes a lot on that. We got interviewed, and we got a lot of hits for that interview as well. That means there is good traction for it. So you may want to look up that website as well. Just purely AI and India across domains. Yeah.
Thanks. So next question is from Zeal. So air pollution is a great threat to sustainability. What AI work is currently happening to mitigate this problem in India? And what are some potential directions with AI in this field? Anyone has any thoughts? Ravi, through the Robert
Yeah,
Bach.
we are doing some work, but I just said it's not at that big a scale that we are able to make a difference, right? So in fact, we have this project that we call Katre, which is air in Tamil, right? So which has been looking at monitoring pollution in Chennai and also in a couple of other cities, and where we are actually looking at using mobile sensors for measuring pollution. Normally in India, many of the places where the pollution measurement is done, you have a single tower that sits somewhere, and typically sometimes the sensor is even above the pollution level, right? I mean, people have not really put too much thought into how these things were designed. And in fact, at one point of time, IIT Madras Gate was labeled as the most polluted point in Chennai. Uh, so I can do that. But the point is, we actually put these mobile sensors in vehicles, right? Like in vans and also in auto rickshaws, we could put these sensors, and then they drive around and they gather data. And then we have been able to build some nice predictive models. All the data that we gathered is also available online now. And but these are small things, right? And one of the interesting stuff that we discover is that in Delhi, for example, there could be parallel roads with very, very diverging levels of pollution. Right? There could be one road on which air quality is absolutely unbreathable, and the next road where it is almost, well, in Delhi you'll never get good air quality anywhere, but it's fine, right? It's not that bad. Right? So these are kind of because of the way the buildings were saying that, so the whole the drafts and the currents and everything changes. So you're getting pockets of clean air and pockets of polluted air, and all these kinds of inferences have been made. So we actually have it out online, and the data set is also available for people to download it. So actually on Kaggle, and we also can download it from the website. And this is the one large scale study I know where people have been looking at AI specifically applied to pollution, but there is a lot of simple things that you could do, like even doing simple regression models and predicting over time and things like that, right? So time series modeling, even those simple things can help a lot in terms of analyzing and understanding pollution. You don't really need heavy duty AI at this point. More important to get the right sensors out there.
There's a Center for Excellence for Research on Clean Air in IIT Delhi. there's a lot of good work happening on measurement of first collecting a lot of data and then analyzing that. Please check out the work of, for example, Riju Rekha Sen as a CS prof in Delhi.
So moving on, Divya has a question on what are your thoughts on bridging the AI to solve the societal problems, so giving back to society, especially when one has to deal with the bureaucracy, like obtaining various permissions to reach the target section of the society. Maybe Geeta, you have had some first-hand experience on this.
Yeah. Absolutely. Sort of when you're trying to change something, there will always be hurdles. I mean, that we have to be very, very clear about. We are not here to say, okay, I'm going to do it because I have extra time and I do it. You have to fight it out. There's no second approach. So while fighting this out, fighting, let's say, the bureaucracy or non-acceptance of change, by the stakeholders, one thing that I found to be very useful, to go with a positive mindset. See, typically what happens, you go and tell somebody, this is very bad, I'm going to change, whatever is that social problem you're talking about. Then sometimes you get like people who are agreeing to you and they will say, yeah, just go and do it. Here is an extra data, here is the place, here is the permission. That's less seldomly happening. It's seldom happens actually. So typically you will come and say, no, this has been tried for 100 years, it's not going to work, and what can you do, like a small girl and boy here trying to change. So it's usually the the reverse that happens. So at that time, what I tend to do is, one, you can blame that guy, like he's like not good, not supportive, all that. Instead you take the other approach, saying, okay, I completely agree. Nobody has been successful, and I may not be successful in this. But tell me, what are the main reasons why people have not been successful? What are those sort of, can you please help me, based on your expertise, list these 10 different things that are the reasons why this has not been successful? So try to sort of get from them the reasons. And then if your solution is addressing, fine. Many times your solution may not be addressing this problem. So then you can go back to the board and then try to look at individual problems and then try to address these minor hurdles to make up the solution for solving the bigger hurdle, right? So converting each no to a learning as to how do I present my solution, or have I missed something? What else do I need to tackle to do this? So looking at it in a flipped manner, saying they are great and I need to learn from them, rather than just take a no, right? So that has always helped me, because you can imagine so many doctors would have said no before even trying on the first patient. And it's fair, right? Because doctors are making this decision and they're taking the liability. It's the health of the person and so on and so forth. So just getting into their shoes and then figuring out why are they saying no to your solution, and trying to address that in a very methodical fashion will definitely help move forward. That's what I would say.
Okay. So Ananya is asking, what are some of the problems in AI that are ripe for AI solutions in India that are ripe for AI solutions, and we are close to solving, and which are some of the problems that would take more time to solve?
So wherever you have already a lot of data, digitization and data already collected, and you have benevolent connections which gives you access to that data in a privacy conformant manner, is the best place to start off with, because then you won't have if you want to pick any problem and then solve it. But if you want to solve that problem which you feel very, very strongly about, go ahead. Try to figure out how to get the right type of data to start with. Obviously, there is no AI without at least the initial data, right, where which is trustworthy. And so that's what it is. So if you want to solve any problem, go to a place where there's good data and possibly good problems that analysis can solve. And if you want to know exactly what it is, it also depends on what kind of connections you have, what kind of exposure to problems you have. So it's actually a very, very broad question. but it's very much context dependent, and who has access versus who. Like for example, government may have a lot of data about let's say this COVID vaccination and so on and so forth. But if you ask me how do I get hold of that data, I do not have. Hopefully Anna Roy, if she was on the call, she would have helped you get there, right? So you need to know exactly, go and get access to that data. So at an individual level, I would say what is the closest data you are, you can get access to, and start there. That's also a good enough point, because AI can bring in changes in many fields. And you're talking to an entrepreneur, extremely optimistic. Unlike Ravi, I feel like every area is ready for AI deployment in India. It is just we need to sort of move forward with persistence, and any field can be modified and made a difference with AI.
So to quickly clarify, I'm not pessimistic. I said that some areas in India, if you're going to deploy AI, it is not enough to work at the algorithm level, right? And I said you have to work all the way, the full stack, all the way up to the deployment is something that you have to think about. I obviously feel very positive about AI, right? I'm not being pessimistic about being able to deploy AI. In some areas, you have to go all the way down. So maybe Ananya's question is more about, hey, what are the areas where the bottom levels are all done, and we can, very quickly come up with AI algorithms, because I know she works in the algorithmic space, right? And so maybe that is the question. But it's not an easy question to answer. I mean, if, like Geeta said, if you're passionate about a problem, go looking for, okay, what is its current state of the problem, right? And then figure out whether you have to start at the bottom and then work your way up, or whether you can already deploy the algorithm. But the challenge in India is that you might have to do the full stack. It is not enough for you to do just the algorithm.
Yeah, I think this is related to the previous question, so we can move from now, and if you have time later, we can get back. So yeah, one question: how as researchers we can work with the industry to solve the problems using AI in India? Maybe Pankaj, if you have any thoughts on that.
I think the environment of having an impact in industry for researchers has never been better. The collaboration that happens today between academia and industry can happen on multiple forums. We are talking about, we have an entrepreneur here and two, both Partha and Ravi from the academia, who are now engaged in joint research with Google. I'm in industry, but I have teams working in ML and at many cutting edge areas of research. So there's lots of avenues. Just dive in. In many of these forums, I think Partha and Ravi, you can probably talk about better than me.
Ravi, any thoughts?
Yeah. So, I mean, Pankaj just talked about two things, right? So we talked about faculty in academia, and I think that both from the industry point of view and from the academia point of view, we really need to scale up in terms of the number of people who can do productive AI research. And so Partha and I belong to a very privileged academic setting, and we are working with a very the place to be in some sense if you are doing applied AI research, right? But then that's not pervading the whole system, right? So how many people can work with Google? Or how many people can work with the Microsoft, or how many people can work with an Amazon? Right? These numbers are very small. So what we really need to do is to make sure that the industry also, right, is becoming more broadly competent, and we have a more vibrant entrepreneurship ecosystem, like what Geeta was alluding to. So we need to have more and more of these before we can start talking about researchers partnering with industry and making meaningful change to India in a large way. Right? Otherwise, these collaborations are going to be limited. Sorry, I'm coming off as a little bit pessimistic, but this is like the millionth and one panel I'm on where we are talking about AI in India, and so I've looked at all the sides of this issue, and I know that
Yeah.
there are some crucial, really crucial stumbling blocks, right, for us to get through before we can really scale and and it's sometimes frustrating because I see the potential, I see the number of good people on all sides of the issue, right, and then we still need to just get that little tiny bit more to push through. So I apologize for sounding so pessimistic. To the extent that Gita thought, I don't think India AI is promising. Come on, but that's not the case. So
No,
let's
maybe
get
it was because of the sort of break in connections. I got the connection wrong. Okay, so but I like the point you mentioned about not just Microsoft, IBM, Google, HPs of the world, but also startups. Definitely, there is huge scope for collaboration of researchers and startups because typically many times what happens is that there are some literally hard-headed entrepreneurs who probably will know a little bit of AI. I mean, I'm also falling in that category, and not done very deep research in a particular area, but we just go ahead saying, okay, we will figure out some of the things when they don't work, because if you wait for perfect answer, you will never be able to start, right? So when you start doing that, though you want to spend more time in the research figuring out all possible methods and so on and so forth, in a startup you rarely have that luxury of doing complete research in particular area, thankfully, because in Niramai we have spent like 5 years on the same problem. We've been able to do some of those, but it's not always possible when there is pressure of investors and all to move forward quickly and so on. So here is where there's a huge opportunity for kind of internships, right, or collaborations between academia and or researchers and startups. I'm sure they'll be very open. These are like challenging, real life, on the ground problems. The only thing is like. The stipends will not be as attractive as you would get in a multinational kind of company, but you'll have like wonderful problems to work on. And also I see another hurdle that usually people come in and say, oh, my IP, right? Of course IP is important, we may go for patenting and so on and so forth, but it's not that a startup picks up an idea from academics and then goes ahead and makes lots and lots of money. No, it's not usually just the idea that makes the money happen at the end of the tunnel whenever that ends, but it's really a lot of hard work beyond that algorithmic change, like Ravi was also alluding to earlier. So I think if you remove these two aspects out, that is, of course, there will be some stipend, but may not be multiples of what you get in other places. And secondly, don't get too much hung up about the IP part. Of course, you will be part of the patents, if any, that's not a problem. So if these two things you're okay, you should actually work with startups who are trying to solve cutting edge real problems using AI, I would say.
Cool. Yeah, so just on that side, like in order to have more engagements, we are also thinking in terms, I mean, we have been releasing data sets on challenging problems, and also thinking about creating challenges that students can participate. So those are some other avenues we've been exploring, and hopefully we'll hear more about that soon. So unfortunately, we have run out of time. We have a lot more questions to go through. So my apologies to the other participants to whose questions we couldn't go through. But just in terms of closing statements from each one of the panelists, if you could have a closing statement by putting yourself in the shoes of our attendees who are all PhD students. So if you have anything to say, that would be good.
Okay, I'll go first. So basically, I would say, there are huge number of problems around in India or any other country that you're coming from. I would say pick a problem which you feel for. That is the best, fun solving that you'll get. In addition to results and so on, it's really fun working on that because you really relate to that problem. So go for it if you're passionate about solving a problem. There will be hurdles, but go for it, go all the way, right? Not just the algorithm, but just the end to end, because there's huge amount of satisfaction trying to solve it end to end.
So let me go. Kind of following up on what Ketal said, right? So one of the things which I find significantly lacking, right, in AI researchers' preparation in India is the overall broad awareness of the ecosystem, right? So all of us are very focused on the research problem that you are working on, right? But how does that research problem would translate into a deployment, right? So for example, we worked on a project with Google where the whole AI component was less than 30% of the overall work that needed to be done before the solution could actually be used by an NGO on the ground, right? So be more aware of the overall ecosystem, and then you can start thinking about building these end-to-end solutions, right? So that is my extortion to people, is that just don't get too narrowly focused on that small piece of AI pie that you are comfortable with, but be more aware of the larger ecosystem and work towards understanding that. So that will make sure that your eventual work has a lot more impact.
Yeah, maybe I'll add a couple of points to this. One would be, um, if you're already in the field, there's been, again, never a better time to be in this field, and it will only grow. So I'm an eternal optimist in terms of the application of ML and AI in just throughout the industry. Yes, there will be deployment challenges, and yes, the real world will come in play, but you're young and developing, and don't let that kind of bog you down too much. Second, I think it's important to, and it's nothing specific to ML work, but just important at this, while being a student, to choose, if you are choosing a career, to be around the right people, and the people that you may have great reputation, or maybe they have worked in areas that you're interested in, and then good things will happen, is just kind of what I say to folks. Just be around the right kind of people. Take your time in choosing whom you might be comfortable kind of collaborating with, working with, and then good things will happen. You're already in this field. This field is only going to grow, and its impact on humans and society is unstoppable at this point.
Great. Thank you to all three of you, Geeta, Ravi, and Pankaj, for taking time out from your busy schedules and sharing all of your insights and experiences with us today. I really enjoyed our discussions, and look forward to staying in touch with all of you and carry forward the discussions further.
Thank you. Great
Thank you.
questions.
And thank you, Partha, for the great panel.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks, everyone.